Welcome to the FarmBits podcast, a product of Nebraska Extension Digital Agriculture. I'm Jackson Stansel.
And I'm Samantha Teaton.
And we come to you each week to discuss the trends, the realities, and the value of digital agriculture.
Through interviews and panels with experts, producers, and innovators from all sectors of digital technology, we hope that you step away from each episode with new practical knowledge of digital agriculture technology. Welcome back for the final episode in our connectivity series here on the FarmBits podcast.
We have now heard from several leaders in the agricultural community about the importance of developing rural connectivity, how public and private partnerships will be necessary for driving progress in rural connectivity, and how the development of technology is important to solving rural connectivity challenges.
In this episode, we will learn about how RealmFive, an agricultural technology company based here in Lincoln, Nebraska, is developing and deploying tech that enables connected farming.
Our guest is Austin Benish, a key account executive at RealmFive. Austin is originally from Valparaiso, Nebraska, and grew up on a diversified ag operation.
Since graduating from the University of Nebraska in 2005, he has worked as an agronomist in Nebraska in various other roles with companies in the Corn Belt and in the Southeast U.S.
As you will hear from Austin, RealmFive offers a platform that emphasizes providing pertinent and actionable data to clients through data gateways, empowering data transfer from connected devices all around a farm.
Their approach is unique, multifaceted, and designed to break down data silos that we so often hear about in digital agriculture.
There's lots to learn, so let's get into our interview with Austin.
I like your seed corn signs in the back.
So thank you. I wish I had them about 8 inches lower so that we could see the full end. But I tried to get. I have a small collection of Nebraska-specific seed corn brands, and while not all of these are Nebraska brands, they all have Nebraska ties based on the marketing. So yeah.
Well, I know Funks, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the one. What's the other two?
So the other one is Treptos, and they're an older seed brand. They're from generations ago in the Wahoo area, and then NC Plus. And it's oddly enough, the Funk family actually just purchased back NC Plus and Midwest seeds from, I believe Monsanto, and I think Monsanto had both of them. And the cool thing is this one right here. This is from probably, I'm guessing, the 50s or 60s, but Rob Seco actually was just refounded here recently. J.C. Robinson, Jay Robinson just bought that. Some of the rights back from Syngenta. So things kind of just come full circle in this space, especially in Nebraska.
Yeah.
Sure. That's
cool.
Interesting.
I didn't actually know about some of those repurchasing. So very cool. Okay. We'll actually get started now. Would you mind telling us a little bit about what RealmFive does and how it got started?
Absolutely. So RealmFive was founded in, I believe, 2015. We actually came through as kind of one of the early members of Innovation Campus and kind of some of the processes there at the University of Nebraska, which was great. But our founders, Steve Tippery and Brant Berkey, got together in 2015 and founded RealmFive, and really on the basis of data aggregation and creating maybe a little bit better system and structure for bringing some pertinent, actionable information from the field and putting it into farmers' hands through the platform.
So what exactly is your role then with RealmFive, and how did you kind of get into that role?
Right. So my title is key account executive, which doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot outside of the company. Largely, my biggest responsibilities are sales, and I do a little bit, I help out a little bit with marketing, and then some other things just kind of internally. But primarily, I'm a sales guy, sales manager. We have a few other folks here that I work with in sales, and we generally work without borders. And so we're handling not just the United States, but we're in, I believe, 5 or 6 different countries now. And so there's a global or international aspect to some of what we do as well.
Very nice.
So if someone were to go to RealmFive's website and do their research like we did beforehand, I thought it was really interesting. They talk about the 5 disruptions of agriculture. Can you describe that for our listeners and how RealmFive is playing a role in this most recent one?
Yeah, absolutely. We get asked about that a lot. So usually from the context of like, what does RealmFive mean? Like, where did you get your name? And that's where we got it. And our philosophy is, and it was new to me when I came to the company as well. And I thought it was a really a nice take on ag technology, because you know, we know that agriculturalists and the ag industry in general, we're usually, or we have been, leading edge of technology for generations, hundreds of years. Really in modern agriculture since the Industrial Revolution, we've seen what we believe is kind of 5 big buckets of innovation, starting kind of around the turn of the 20th century with mechanization and just, just the onslaught of machinery that came in, right? And then we moved into hybridization and GMOs and the genetic end of things from a cropping system perspective. Really in kind of the late 90s and early 2000s, we moved into that precision space that we're familiar with. And, we think about ag technology, it kind of gets lumped into precision agriculture, and they're really 2 different things. So the 5th realm or the 5th disruption, is a data and automation space. And the idea here is, we haven't moved out of any one of these particular disruptions. We're still innovating machinery, we're still innovating genetics, and we're still finding better ways to grow corn or to grow animals or whatever the case might be. But there is a maturation line there, right? So these kind of epochs or these disruptions, they do mature and they kind of flatline a little bit. Well, what are we doing with all this information and data that we've generated in these previous spaces? That's going to be the next phase, or that is the next phase, and we're fairly well on our way, I think, with determining what technologies provide the best look or the best access to this information. One of the things that we don't always realize in agriculture, particularly on the production side, because we're so close to it, but as an industry, we don't realize the vast amount of data and information that we're capable of generating, and we do generate it. We don't always capture it. Outside investors are seeing that, and so we see more pressure from, coastal investors and folks from California or New York or Florida or wherever they happen to be coming from, foreign countries, coming in and taking a look at agriculture, and they hadn't before. Particularly in the software and the technology space. So, we're very proud of the fact that we are kind of a bunch of farm kids. I mean, most of the folks that work for RealmFive, they were born and grew up in the ag industry. Parents were farmers. They themselves have been farmers or investors in this space for a long time. Engineers and software designers included. And so, I think that's an important aspect is making sure that we understand not just the business end of agriculture, but maybe the cultural end of agriculture as well, and what the value is here, in the middle part of the country, as well as maybe areas of high productivity in other crops.
Yeah, and that's something that we've heard is really important from some of our other guests on the show as well. Tyler McGee, who's founding a startup in North Carolina, he said he basically puts all of his employees through some sort of agricultural education if they aren't coming from a farm, just because of how important that is.
Yeah, I think that is at all the stops in my career, I've always kind of tried to take that on because, well, I mean, just on a population basis alone, right? Ag professionals, we're going to have to bring people in from the outside. We have to, but that doesn't mean that we should bring them in from the outside and not educate them on the importance of what it is that we do and the value of the place that we come from. I myself, 5th, 6th generation farmer, I suppose. The first generation that's not actively farming in my family, unfortunately, but I'll be honest, I grew up farming just about half an hour north of Lincoln in Valparaiso or near Valparaiso.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that there were people who weren't farmers growing up, right? It was kind of one of those things where everyone in my family and everyone in my community was tied inextricably to agriculture. Mm-hmm. And so, it was a little bit older, probably older than I should have been when I realized that people have other jobs. But we take that for granted sometimes as well. And that there are folks who simply don't know what we do on a daily basis, or they don't know what the, what is or isn't acceptable, or what is or isn't important to us in the industry. And I think it's our job to communicate that, and to communicate it as concisely and effectively, and as professionally as we can.
So I guess you've talked about this 5th realm, this new disruption that's going on in agriculture. How exactly is RealmFive participating in that disruption? What are some of your product offerings that are kind of taking us into that 5th realm here in agriculture?
Yeah, and that's a good question. It's there's different levels of participation in all this stuff, right? Are you creating? Are you selling? Are you just trying to market? Is it transactional? Is it relationship? But we, as an industry, we look at all of these different modes of involvement. Really, RealmFive, we would consider ourselves innovators first and foremost. Probably sales oriented last, depending on whatever the scale is. Obviously, we do sell things, but we're not an equipment company. We're not a sensor company. We're not a we're not a physical. We sell these things. They're part of our product offering, I guess, features offering. But these are necessary things to get us to where we are, to get us to where we're going, which is the innovation, truly the data aggregate portion of things. We have to have collection devices, or we have to have these things that are out in the field. And so you ask, how are we participating in this? We're creating new ways of collecting this information. We're creating new ways of viewing and distributing this information. Something that we talk about here is pertinent and actionable information. There's a lot of cool stuff out there, right? There's when we think about whether if we walk into a cornfield, we're at 32,000 corn plants per acre, 36,000 corn plants per acre. There's a lot of biology going on, right? That's 30-some thousand factories per acre that are basically producing, producing something, and they're consuming goods, and they're working this biological process. We can track, as an industry, as science, we can track almost all of that. How much of it is pertinent? How much of it is something that a farmer can base their actions on? That's the question we have to ask. And, we can only move so much information through a space at any given time that we can actually do something with. And so we want to provide, if we're talking about agronomy and irrigation, we want to be able to provide aspects of soil moisture management and temperature. We want to be able to provide aspects of, maybe what's going on in the leaf canopy and the different elements of maybe atmospheric conditions. We want to, because those are things that farmers can take advantage of in the moment and make some money on them and increase efficiency. If we're in livestock scenarios, we just recently launched our barn view, specifically with swine finishers. We can track every biological aspect of a hog. You can do it. It's the technology's there. It's very expensive. It's very difficult to move that much data, particularly in limited connectivity areas. So what do farmers need? What do producers need out of their hogs, information-wise, to make them more efficient? They need to know about feed, they need to know about water, and they need to know about air. And then they can manage those conditions appropriately. They can do it theoretically with less people and less time, but if nothing else, they can at least do it with full knowledge of what has to be done and not having to guess.
That's really interesting. We've had, last week we just talked about, or I guess the episode that was being released on February 11th, that like only 11% of the data that we're generating is actually being used. And, you guys are trying to tap into that, and that's awesome to hear about. So, can you kind of just describe maybe some examples of some of the things you're connecting, or are you taking older products maybe that producers already have and connecting those so that way you're saving them some money of buying something new? So can you kind of talk a little bit more specifically about what you're connecting?
Absolutely. I should go back. When we talk about products, really what we look at, the products that we sell, we think of these physical products or these specific aspects of our platform. Those are features. Quite frankly, if we talk about features and benefits in the sales and marketing world, those are features. They provide a benefit. The product that we're talking about really is the connectivity. It's the RealmFive platform. And so, specifically, what are we connecting? There are, we can talk about soil moisture probes. Specifically, there are a lot of them. We try to remain, very agnostic. We're not tied to any single platform. We have API partners in the space where we are connecting things, into their platform, for use. But there are multiple, there are three kind of primary brands, actually four primary brands of soil moisture probes that we're connecting right now. But there are many more of them. It's just a matter of making sure that the connection's correct, or the wiring is correct, for lack of a better term. But whether it's a Watermark or a Centec drill and drop, or an AquaCheck soil moisture probe, we have a really cool innovation we put together here about a year and a half ago, I believe, in response to John Deere Field Connect. They were going to not support that line anymore from a software perspective, and there's a number of these stations that are out there in fields that growers had spent a fair bit of money on, and they didn't want to just replace them wholesale, right? And so we were able to build out a drop-in network where we can replace their electronics, plug ours in, and reutilize that equipment either on our platform, R5 Click, or we API with John Deere Operations Center. And so we can push that information directly into JD Ops. The grower really doesn't know any different about how it's getting there. They just know that they can continue to get the information that they need in the same way that they were getting it before.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like what you're really offering is basically the plumbing that is able to get, whatever's coming out of these devices in the field to wherever it needs to go for farmers to make the most action on it.
Plumbing and I would say unified access.
Okay.
And so one of the other issues that we've identified, and we're not unique in this, everybody's identified this, that, this sort of proprietary lockout thing that we have going on right now in the industry, right? Where we have somebody says, I have a great platform, but nobody else can use it. Right. Or you can't use anybody else's stuff with it. This doesn't work. Most farmers don't want to open up 15 apps in the morning. I've been doing this for 16, 17 years. I've been in it my whole life. In the last 10 or 12 years since we've had smartphones in everyone's pocket and hand, I've never heard a farmer once say, I just wish I had one more app. Can I get one more app on my phone, please? I want one more thing to manage. Now, we want to make that easy, right? So we want to put as much of this information into as few of apps, as few platforms as possible. If we could get it down to one, that's the holy grail, right? That's that's the thing that we all want, is this sort of unified platform where everybody works together and everybody's profitable. We would love to see that. I think we can get there as an industry because we are seeing receptiveness, from other partners around where, other OEMs or data providers, they understand that as well. Is that, when we make a process so complex that it's difficult to adopt, then adoption doesn't happen. And in order for, growers, producers and retailers and distributors alike, in order for them to realize the efficiency gains of technology and data connectivity, we have to adopt the technology. And we're only going to adopt it if it's simple to use. If it makes our days longer and adds hours to our weeks, let's just go back to doing it on paper. I don't think anybody wants to do that.
Exactly.
But unfortunately, there's a lot of co-ops, there's a lot of farmers out there, there's a lot of livestock producers that honestly, they're keeping track of inventory on a whiteboard in a shed. It's in a notebook someplace, or it's in a spreadsheet that's generically marked on their computer. And come tax time, come inventory time, whatever it is, it makes it difficult.
Mm-hmm. So a lot of generally your product offering is really reliant on connectivity, and it sounds like it's either local connectivity or remote connectivity. So how exactly, and you kind of referenced this earlier, how exactly has rural connectivity and the lack thereof really influenced how y'all have pushed out these product offerings?
I think it's forced some innovation. We would love, don't get me wrong, we would love to see broadband everywhere, like universally. I live in Lincoln. It's great, right? I mean, this is the best internet connection I've ever had, to be quite honest. I've lived in kind of all over the country, but we don't have fiber optic in every rural township across America. It's not a thing that really exists yet. 5G is not quite there. So the lack of connectivity in these remote areas, like, you don't see, most of the corn's grown where there isn't connectivity. Most of the hogs are grown where there's not connectivity. So we've had to work around that. Our systems are primarily gateway-based systems. So what we do is we're able to basically use LoRa radio to send data from field level sensors, barn level sensors, to a gateway, and then send that via cellular data to the cloud. And that's how we access it. It's about as simple as it can be. It's not a simple process. We try to make it as simple as it can be, but there's still limitations in that. Range is one of the limitations, and we're working on innovations all the time to extend our range. We have a scenario in Western Nebraska where we can connect, I don't remember what the number is exactly. I want to say it's like 62,000 acres within our network. It's a lot under our network. Now, that's not something that's standard. That's not something that we sell. Look, the connectivity on most gateways, it is limited. Now we have systems we have a system we call Fetch, where we're able to greatly increase the distance. So we'll be launching that a little bit later this year, and commercially. Elevation, we're learning more and more about how elevation and topography affect these scenarios. And so the nice thing is that with our kind of RealmFive view, if we want to call it that, a grower, a producer, a retailer, an ag service supplier, they can sort of build their own networks. They're not relying on somebody else. We're full stack connectivity. And to us, full stack means it's everything from the ground all the way to the cloud, right? Including the development. Our guys are our engineers, our guys and gals, they're in-house. We don't have customer support that isn't connected to us. We don't contract that stuff out. And so when something goes wrong, we don't have a finger to point. We can't say, oh, it's this provider. Oh, it's that provider. Oh, it's, shoddy work from a, no, it's ours. Thankfully, not much goes wrong. We're pretty well motivated to not have things go wrong. And we become very proactive in our approach when it comes to customer support and servicing. Our embedded engineers and firmware design folks, they're right here in-house as well. And so when we see that there's something that maybe isn't functioning at 100%, we can get in front of it. We can push a fix out, and more times than not, the producer never knows that there was ever going to be an issue, and we can get in front of anything that's out there. That's a key component to us. And back to the original question, that all kind of comes from a lack of connectivity, unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it. It motivates us to be better because we understand, coming from where we come from, we understand the challenges that producers face in rural wherever. The last thing that you want is to feel helpless because the information and the data that you paid to get isn't coming in. An example of that, all of our devices, all of our field level equipment has onboard recording. We call it TrueSync technology. Because of the way that we've engineered our systems, we have a redundancy built in to where everything's recorded on board. That memory is not wiped until it actually makes connection with the cloud. And so if something happens, a gateway goes down. If whatever, a battery goes dead, somebody like me is out there mowing a ditch and knocks it over, or whatever the case is, or runs it over with a combine or something. There's still sensors out there that are collecting information and data. That's your data. If you're a farmer, if you're a hog producer, if you're a dairy person, that's still your data. You don't want to lose it. You've paid for it. So when that gateway is reestablished and connected, we can backfill that information and data so we don't lose the aggregate. The alerts may not be there, but the reality is, in that short period of time, that can be very, very costly over the long haul for folks that don't have that kind of coverage.
Absolutely.
I'll say you really did a great job of covering some of those challenges with both local and, broader connectivity.
The crazy thing, and it's such a personal thing for me, because like I said, I've got great fiber optic internet. I can't complain. I can stream anything I want. My parents live 23 miles away from me in Valparaiso. They live on the highest hill in our township, man. Like they live on the highest elevation in Oak Creek Township in Saunders County, Nebraska. Man, they can't get internet for anything. Like, it is awful. Like, they just cannot get even good cell phone connection. It's just a gap. It happens. It's nobody's fault necessarily, but it is a thing that more rural folks deal with than maybe should, and it's unfortunate because it is slowing down adoption rates of technology.
Mm-hmm.
From the numbers we saw, it's more than 50% of people don't have reliable internet from their farm shop. And so that's just, how do you deal with that? And maybe you can hit on that a little bit. How do you get things to the cloud if you can't get reliable internet anywhere on the farm?
So yeah, it is difficult. And so particularly if you're dependent on a Wi-Fi system or something that is maybe a higher bandwidth kind of a scenario, it's very difficult. I just talked to some swine producers actually in the Eastern Corn Belt, and they're in that spot exactly where they've tried several, different systems to get information out. The way that we've engineered things, it doesn't take many bars on a phone to get information into the cloud from our system, right? So we have a very efficient data transfer method. That's very, very helpful because it's, one bar on my cell phone, I'm able to transmit a great amount of data very, very reliably. And so, how do you do it? I don't know. I think you got to find the highest spot and hope that you can reach a tower. If you're going about that with ours, we have some flexibility in our system. And so we've built that in because we have an understanding of, what these spaces look like and really what we're dealing with.
Yeah. So I guess with your gateways, what are we talking about in terms of the amount of data throughput that you might have through one of those? I mean, is it really high, or are you kind of able to condense that data down to limit how much actually needs to get to the cloud to only that pertinent information like you talked about earlier?
Yes, we are, and we do. And so, it's a question of, do we, so an example would be, do we need to receive every bit of information every moment that it goes? No, probably not. We need to find a balance. So we need to be able to push alerts, right? So if we're in a livestock situation and something goes wrong, you want to know, right?
Mhm.
Feeds out, water's out, fans are off, whatever. But if everything's running right, you don't need to know that every minute. And so, we can space out data packet dumps to maintain battery life and to sort of, mitigate the amount of data that needs to move at any given time. But also, what information do we really need? What are producers asking for? What are growers looking for? That's part of it. And then I think, the other thing is just engineering a system that is just more efficient in its construction. We talk about the data throughput. How much can we move through? I'm not that guy. I'm not technical enough to say it's this much or that much. But what I can tell you is, we're comfortable moving up to 50 devices through a single gateway. And so that's a lot. And if you put that into perspective of a cropping scenario, I don't know on a couple, 3-4 pivots of cropping ground, or, corn or soybeans, I don't know if you can get to 50 devices. I mean, I don't know anybody would want to, and so we have a larger capacity than we'll probably ever need. In a livestock scenario, maybe we could get close, but I don't see a need to do that either, because the way that we're structuring our systems, we're really trying to narrow that funnel a little bit and make sure that we're providing pertinent, actionable information, not every single detail of every single animal or every single plant that's happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that really comes back to, the biggest thing is coming back to who's using this information. More times than not, it's a producer, right? It's a corn grower, or it's an ag retailer, or it's a livestock producer. That's somebody who's in an advising role. Those are the folks who are using it. They want it simple to use. They don't want to have to sort through just page after page after page after page of stuff to try to figure out how to plug it all in. They want insights. Right? They want something that they can take a look at and say, this is the problem at hand, or this is an opportunity to provide greater value or greater efficiency. An example of that is just understanding, hey, if we have good soil moisture, if we have good subsoil moisture, things are happening the right way. We have an opportunity to get an extra 12-15% yield out of a particular cornfield. Let's go out there. Let's give it another shot of nitrogen. Let's give it another a shot of fungicide to get it into the fall, whatever it might be. Those are the types of decisions folks are making with our platforms.
Yep.
Yeah, the decision making, capabilities is really important, and what really brings the value to the data. Are there any other challenges, maybe seasonally, like thinking right now in this really cold stretch that we're having, or if there's something in the middle of the growing season that you'd get interference, maybe saturated soils with some of your sensors, or anything with livestock? Is there anything seasonally that causes some interesting challenges?
Other than my fingers getting cold or getting really, really hot when I go out there in the middle of summer to do something, not really. The way that our devices, we have you mentioned sensors and soil moisture and maybe compaction rates or something, and being able to move to the soil. We actually have a long-term product we call Furrow, and Furrow it's a 5-year battery life. It's a potted device. It attaches to soil moisture probe. We can bury it in the ground for 5 years, and it transmits to a gateway.
Wow.
Which is great, right? I mean, it's terrific, and it's great at different times of the year, right? So, early season soil temperatures and moistures, like that's really important information for folks. But nobody's going to go out there in February and drop a soil moisture probe to figure this out, or a temperature probe. Like, I don't know, it's February 11th right now, and I'm sure not going to go out there in 12-degree weather. But if the probe is there when we warm up in March, we know a lot of things. Right? It can give us a lot of information. Well, the question is how well does that signal penetrate under the ground in different soil situations? And it varies between very coarse soils and very fine soils and compacted soils. But we've not had a problem with anything that we have deployed currently, and we've been under some. I know we're in some highly compacted ground under massive power lines and a pretty good distance away from a gateway in Indiana right now with the deployment that I put out last year. Quite frankly, we've not missed a beat with it. And so I wish I could say this is the gap, because that's always what I want to do, is identify where those are. I haven't found any that are seasonal or that are conditional. I would say generally speaking, don't try to reach further than you're comfortable reaching with the signal, or don't try to handicap equipment just to kind of see. I mean, that's our job. We do that, but no, we haven't experienced any seasonal gaps to this point.
Sure. Yeah. So I work with pivot telemetry quite a bit, as and kind of my research operations. And it's interesting because, folks like AgSense and some of these other pivot telemetry providers, I guess, have recently gone to more like cellular connection to their pivot end towers. And I guess a lot of that was driven by, if you have these big hills that your pivots are moving over the top of, and you have, rapidly growing corn that, it's tall, it's really hard to get a radio signal from the end tower on a pivot to the center location. And so have y'all found any issues with like elevation? I know you mentioned hills earlier. Is that something that's come up at all?
I mean, it is. I mean, you want to be line of sight, you want to be as elevated as you can when possible. We're pretty conservative with our deployment though. And so when, the training, the advice that we give to our distributors, and when we do something internally and on our own, we're generally pretty conservative on that. We want the customer experience to be positive, and we want to make sure that we're setting them up for success. And so, there definitely is some changes in signal strength as the season moves along, but we haven't put ourselves in a situation where we have been negatively impacted. Sure. We're familiar enough with it where we understand that there's a big difference between V5 and V12 corn. There's a substantial biomass difference. Some of our engineers and whatnot, they grew up farming in Northeast Nebraska. And so they understand what those big rolling hills look like. And, we've got folks from different parts of the country who understand what these sort of, very vast areas of like Mississippi Delta look like as well, right? So you can stretch out for miles, or Southern Illinois, where you just can't even see the horizon. It's so far away, right?
Yep, exactly.
But we do understand there are, these are the variables that we want to work with, providers of our technology, to make sure the customer has a good experience, that they're accessing the information that they're intending to accrue. That's the important part. Again, it goes back to, if it's not easy for the producer, they're not going to adopt the technology. If it's not accessible for the producer, they're not going to adopt the technology. The value has to be there.
Yeah. And I think when you kind of bring up the conservativeness in deployment, I think that's a really good way to put it. And so when you think about your deployments that you have out there right now, what are we talking about in terms of devices that are typically connected to a single gateway? Or there are multiple gateways on a farm? What does that look like for a producer who may be thinking about installing one of these networks out there?
Yeah, I mean, it's not unusual to have, probably a standard number is probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 8. Between it. So, one of the things that we do, if it's going to be a fairly heavy load, one of the things that we suggest in a cropping situation, or possibly an ag retail situation, someone who's maybe a distributor of commodity goods and wants to do some work there, where they're going to have a lot more devices. One of our products, one of our features is it's a weather station that acts also as a gateway, right? So you kind of you sort of combine some of these things, and so it's rainfall, barometric pressure, wind speed, direction, temperature, all that stuff, humidity. But it also functions as a gateway. And so all those other end devices, and we refer to them as ended devices, that will all feed into this gateway and send. So, you can have, for sure, you can have a few soil moisture probes on that. We have a state monitor vibration sensor product called Flip, which is kind of a really cool thing. It's about a 5-second install. It's magnetic.
Nice.
You literally slap it onto whatever it is that you want to, gauge on, off, or a vibration frequency on. You pull the tab and it automatically connects to a gateway. Like even I can install it, and I'm not real bright. But we can provide numerous devices. Somebody's getting into a contiguous quarter, contiguous circle farming situation. I mean, you could theoretically see between pivot tower monitors, flips, soil moisture probes, weather stations, you could easily see a dozen or more devices connected. If you're in a livestock scenario, like with Barn View, I've got two. I know a few weeks ago here, I just installed 2 quad finisher barns. Each room has multiple devices, and they're all, and both of those barns in that site are running through a single gateway. And so, between flow meters, temperature, humidity, and feed outage, we're running what is that? I don't even know. It's 14, 15 devices, something like that.
That's really
and I would say
interesting.
that would be fair. That'd be fairly standard in a livestock scenario. Now, if we're talking about something like float, which is another grouping of our products, which is really what it is, kind of in the effluence or manure management space, but really it's pond level monitoring or lagoon level monitoring. I mean, we digitally monitor, that via RTK signal, and so we're able to gauge elevation, and we can get sub-inch on that, and so we eliminate some of the redundancy and paperwork and different things in that environmental and sustainability space. But typically there we're going to have 1 to 4 devices hooked up through a base gateway. But we can also hook up dozens more. And a dairy facility is a great example where we may have temperature and humidity on a compost pile, or we may have fans running, or we may have who knows what it is, weather, everything else. We could easily have 24 or so devices hooked up that would be within range of a gateway. The nice thing is all that information comes to a singular platform, right? And so you've got your effluence management, you've got your sort of operational stuff, and then you've got all the weather and atmospheric information all coming into a space where the producer can see it.
That's really nice.
That was going to be my question. I was going to say, so if you have like the crop, the crop sensors, and you have the manure sensors, and you have the livestock sensors, it's all going to one app?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, it can. And so, one of the things we talk about, sort of our tagline is simple, reliable, and scalable. So we want to create these systems that are they're simple to use, they're simple to install, they're simple to maintain. We want full season battery life on things. We don't want anything that's hardwired in and when we can avoid it. And so none of our devices, none of our equipment, very few of them. I think there's only one product that actually does hardwire, and that's a pivot tower monitor. But everything is either solar or it's run off of a battery pack or AA batteries. And we've tweaked it so we can generally get a season out of AA batteries, and then about 5 years out of our battery packs, and then the solar is solar, right? All of our devices have device health monitors on them, and so we know when something is running low on battery, we know when the connectivity strength is low or not well, and we need to fix something, whatever it might be. So we can give an alert or a warning to a producer or a service provider to say, hey, go switch batteries out, or make sure this connection is there, so we don't lose that space or that information. The reliability is obvious, right? So we want to be reliable. If we're not reliable, what's the point, right? Nobody's going to spend money on a system that isn't reliable. So that's a pretty obvious one. But the scalability, I like to talk about a little bit. That's kind of to your point, Samantha, where we want a system that's not only scalable, like we could add on depth in any given vertical in agriculture. So I put a weatherfront gateway out in a cornfield. Okay, well, I want to be able to scale that. I'm put a soil moisture probe on it. Maybe I want to monitor my pivot. Maybe I want to monitor, whether my well is on or off, and on and on and on. But we also want to be able to scale out, right? So we want to be able to connect that agronomy information with maybe some of our operational data and information. Are our bin fans running? Is our dryer running when it's supposed to be running? And I don't want to have to drive to a bin site to check this out and get out of the combine and go do that, or send somebody over there. I want to be able to look at my phone to do that. Maybe I've got livestock as well. So can I look at that livestock? Yes, we can look at that all in the same app, and we can say, yes, my finisher barns are, everything's good there. The feed's not out, the water's running, the temperature is appropriate. We can verify, inventory levels if you're in the ag retail space, and we can tie all these things together. It's a single app, for lack of a better term. I hate the word app, but for lack of a better term, that's what it is. But it's a unified platform that we're able to pull this stuff into, not only within that vertical space, but across verticals as well.
Once you have all that data and that data is available to a farmer, is what you're providing basically just that data and saying, okay, farmers, like this is your decision to make, or inventory management, this is your decision to make, or are you actually kind of looking into building out analytics on top of that data and starting to provide some decision recommendations or suggestions as well?
Yeah, I mean, right now we're not doing a lot of analytics because each system is pretty subjective, and so trying to make a standardized analytical statement across whatever it happens to be is difficult. But what we do allow for is to be able to set alerts and thresholds in various aspects for some of the immediacy, and then to be able to kind of keep an aggregate and a sort of a catalog of this information and data to be able to draw trend lines. And so we're building that out internally. I would say most of our customers are probably doing that because we're generally a B2B business. Okay, and so we're working with advisors, we're working with retailers and distributors of our products, but generally all other products as well, right? So co-ops or equipment equipment implements, livestock advisors, folks like that.
Mm-hmm.
They may already have a system that we can plug into, and so we try to make our API as accessible as possible. And we do a fair bit of that as well, to where, look, our R5 Click is awesome. It's a really easy to use, fast platform. Not everybody always wants to adopt that right away. And so we give them the option, and if we have compatible information with the platform that you're currently using, let's discuss how we can get that in there.
That's a really cool way to do it, because I know there are a lot of people that are so focused on their niche. I mean, and you have to be in order to provide good analytics. You've got to be really in depth, and so I guess being able to get that data to those analytics is a really important thing for people that want to use them.
It is, and it seems like there's always 1,000 ways to cut a pie, but the way that I want my pie cut is exactly the right way for me. And so
Right.
let's enable producers and growers to be able to do that, and advisors and retail providers to be able to slice and dice this pie the way that is best for them and their customers.
Yeah,
That's awesome. So with all this data that you're generating, do you guys offer like a database service or somewhere where the growers can store all their data, or how are you handling all that you're collecting?
Yeah, our stuff, I mean, we run through AWS, and so it's we don't really get into that. One of the things that we don't ever want to be in a position to do, is be a data sales place. There's the data that we generate, it's producers' data, right? So it's whoever pays for that information, that's who gets the information. And so, our view is, if it's a grower or a producer, if it's a retailer looking at managing inventory, that's their information, that's their data. We hand it over to them and we get out of the way. Now, we do have backups and redundancies, and so yes, we do. We do help manage that, or at least help keep that on a platform somewhere. But as far as doing something with it, and once it's generated, we're pretty hands off.
Sure. That's a conversation that we've had with some other producers that we've talked to. I mean, obviously producers want to have a hold on their data and be able to determine where it goes. And obviously, anytime you're in a business like this is something you have to be aware of. So
absolutely. And I mean, look, somebody wants to take their data and move it someplace else, that's how it works. And we can't, we don't see a need, or we don't have a desire to get in the way of that data transfer. It's at the end of the day, the producer, the grower, they need to be taken care of in this space. And this is part of this fifth realm, right? This is this new disruption, and everyone's kind of trying to feel it out. Still, we've been doing this for the better part of a decade. We've been talking about data aggregates. I think we're starting to get a handle on the value of information and data, but nobody really knows how to wield that yet. And so, generally I personally, and in our company, we're going to side with the producer and the grower on that and make sure that they're taken care of.
Can you go ahead and paint a picture of what this connected farm looks like, or where do you think we're going? Some farms probably are connected with your guys' help, but where do you want to see more farms go?
Yeah, it's funny. I saw I'd seen that on the question earlier, and it was ironic because as I was reading this yesterday evening, I was actually reading it while our CEO Steve Tippery was conducting a seminar at World Ag Expo on this very subject. And so anybody who actually wants to look at World Ag Expo, Steve did a seminar on yesterday, actually February, I guess was 10th, specifically about the future of the connected farm. We brought in some industry experts and industry representatives and had conversations with them and kind of spliced in some interview stuff. But our perspective on it is that agriculture is going to continue to be more connected over time. It seems obvious, but then when you ask somebody to explain that, they really can't draw any lines to evidence or proof of or what that's going to look like. We feel that automation is going to continually play a role and an increasing role over time. And artificial intelligence, AI, is already playing a huge role. When we talk about soil moisture probes, that's artificial intelligence. We don't think of it that way because it's not a robot, but for all intents and purposes, it is. We talk about analytics, insights, and those engines. That's AI. And so we're going to continue to have reliance on that. We have to, right? We're just not making more farmers, not at the rate that we need to manage the land that we have in the traditional aspect. And so how do we continue to produce food, or whether at a higher efficiency or a higher volume or both? It's probably going to come through some level of automation, not to replace jobs, but to simply, mitigate and make their lives a little bit easier, right? Help them, help farmers, help growers, help producers, help integrators be more efficient in their process and maybe realize fuller potential, right along. How it's connected, I think it's going to be a variety of ways. I think that we're going to see broadband in places. We're going to see broadband lag in places for a long time. The money's just not there to invest in it. And so not in all places. And so we're going to need to find workarounds. We're going to have to continue to innovate, and we're going to need to do that not in buckets, not in silos. These verticals that I mentioned, we're working in, essentially 5 verticals across the space, and in livestock and in machines and, in agronomy and in irrigation and inventory management. We want to knock the silos down around those verticals, right? And so we want to make sure that we're sharing information across the space, that we're working with partners who have growers and producers' best interests in mind, and that are kind of also working towards this sort of common vision of, what does a better, more connected farm look like? That still includes the grower, that still includes the producer. I think automation is key, and it would be really cool. It would have been great in like the 1980s if I didn't have to go out and, as a little kid, go walk and pick up rocks in a 5-gallon bucket or something, right? Or walk thistles, or walk, soybean fields, or whatever the case was. That would have been great. I think there's some, essential learning components in my life that led to that. So how do we balance culture with automation? I think we're going to get there, and we're going to figure that out. We're not going to take away the culture for the sake of science.
I think it's a really good take. We need that take right now.
we never have before, right? I mean, the sky is always falling because, somebody big came in with a new technology, and now there's not going to be any farmers. Well, we're still farming. There's still farmers. We still have culture. We still have, our key elements that make our agricultural and our agrarian community important and strong, and, the best in the world here in North America, in the United States. Well, we're not going to lose that. Technology is going to enhance that. It has at every turn. And so, let's find some equitable solutions, or some solutions that make sense for partnerships across the industry, to put the grower, the producer in the driver's seat.
I'm going to tell you, I really needed that take this morning because, thinking about like automation and kind of the future of where we're heading, it's easy to kind of get lost in that whole idea of what all is this going to take away, instead of just thinking about what all is this going to make possible and it just enhance in our lives, so.
It does. I think it's funny because it's like, I think that 2 people can watch a sci-fi movie, a farmer and not a farmer. And I think the farmer always walks away with, oh my gosh, it's going to be like Blade Runner on the farm. and like the reality is like that, innovation isn't dystopian. Technology doesn't make a dystopian society. And it's not going to turn our industry into that. We are, at every turn, agriculture has increased efficiency, increased profitability, improved quality of life for our stakeholders with innovation and technology.
So for somebody who is really interested in learning more about RealmFive, after listening to this interview, where should they go to find out a little bit more? I think we're going to put the seminar in the show notes. We'll be able to put a link to that in the show notes so people can go find that Steve Tippery did. But where else can they go to learn more about RealmFive?
Yeah, our website's generally the best. It's just realmfive.com, spell out 5. So it's RealmFive.com. And we're continually adding to that and updating some stuff. Barnview just came on there. That's kind of a cool one to check out. We're going to have some really cool product and feature upgrades coming forward here this spring, that we'll be launching over the next couple of weeks. And so that'd be a good place to check it out. Add us on LinkedIn. We probably see the most traffic and the most insightful social media interaction on LinkedIn, but we're also on Twitter and Facebook. And so those are places they can check out as well.
Awesome.
So what is one piece of advice that you would like to leave listeners with, whether they're exploring, some new connected devices on their farm, or maybe thinking about IoT for the first time? What advice do you have?
Yeah, I think I was thinking about this. there's different advice that I give different people, right? So like if I talk to high school kids, it's different than if I give a farmer who's 65 years old and doesn't want to have me on his farm anymore because it's cold and it's February. But I think the catch-all advice here is, find the thing that is valuable. When it comes to adoption of technology, adoption of innovation, it's not about price. It's not about functionality. It's not about something that's cool or not cool. It's about value. It's a combination of sort of all of those things. Samantha, what's valuable to you may be different, than what's valuable to Jackson on your farming operations. And I think be honest with your service provider and your advisor about what you find value in, and that's going to help speed adoption, and it's going to get you in the right place with innovation.
Thank you very much to Austin Benish of RealmFive for joining us here on the FarmBits podcast. It was eye-opening to learn more about how an agricultural technology company right here in Lincoln, Nebraska is enabling connectivity on the farm. So one thing that Austin said that really stood out to me is that RealmFive views kind of their lack of connectivity that's out there in rural America as a reason to spur innovation. And so they're emphasizing innovation with all the features that they have that empower their overall product offering, like all these connected devices and gateways that are out there on farms. Part of that is focusing on specifically pertinent and actionable data for their clients, which makes the platform as efficient as possible by really honing in on that data that is the most important to transfer and connect on their platform.
Exactly. Yeah, it was so interesting to hear about some of these current challenges, but then also how they're overcoming it with like local connectivity. And they're doing it in innovative ways. They have several products, and they're all working to move data faster and reliably. And that was something that Austin did a great job of hitting on, that it really only matters if it's reliable. And so they're just striving for those solutions.
Yep, absolutely. Reliable, scalable, and at the end of the day, they want to be agnostic, right? To empower data for a lot of different platforms. So that's a wrap for this episode of the FarmBits podcast and for this series on connectivity and ag.
Yep, and in our next episode, we will dive into best practices for on-farm research experiments, particularly using digital tools with Laura Thompson on the Nebraska On-Farm Research Network, before starting our next series, which is focused on planting technologies. And we look forward to having you join us next week.